Make me take PT every month, will you? Posted by Eggleby 2003. I was in the US Army and the Army National Guard for over 20 years. I did finally get my pension, but I was ready to throw all that time away because of the inability of a first lieutenant to count to 8. We had an annual APFT scheduled as part of a drill weekend. A drill weekend consisted of 4 unit training assemblies, or UTAs. Each UTA was equivalent to a day of active duty pay. The duty day started at 7 a.m., lunch at 12, final formation at 4:30 p.m., and then released for the day unless an overnighter was on the training schedule. Promotions were contingent on passing the Army Physical Fitness Test, as well as a bunch of other random qualifications, such as military schools, professional development, military awards and decorations, rifle qualifications, civilian training and/or schooling, and college degrees. The APFT consisted of 3 events: push-ups, sit-ups, and a 2-mile run. It has since been changed, but that was what it was when I was in. I'm a natural runner. I ran track in high school. Tall and lean with good stamina. Not too fast, but I was steady, 6-minute miles all day long. Sit-ups were never really a problem for me. Push-ups, however, not much for upper body strength. I've always struggled with push-ups. It's the only event of the APFT that I ever actively trained. I could max out the other 2 events, but push-ups, I was happy if I could make the minimum required to pass the test. I was up for promotion. I trained push-ups for months prior to the test. On the day of the test, one of the smokers in the unit wanted to run with me, to pace off me so he could pass the PT test. I did the required number of push-ups to pass that event, and I was flying high, knowing the other 2 events were easy for me. We ran on a quarter-mile high school track, 8 laps for 2 miles, and as we passed our score, in this case, the idiot first lieutenant, we'd yell out our last name and he'd check off the completed lap. My buddy and I ran side by side for all 8 laps, and when we got to the last lap, the lieutenant said I had another one to do. We explained that we ran together for all 8 laps, and if one of us passed, both of us passed, but he wasn't buying it. He made a mistake and couldn't admit it. He was adamant that I had to run another lap, and because I was running slower than I normally would have to let the smoker keep up, I couldn't complete another lap in time required to pass the test. I was marked as a PT failure and wasn't eligible for promotion. Because I was an NCO, there wasn't that many slots that opened up in a year in my job classification. The opening went to another NCO further down the promotion list than me. I was ticked. My civilian job was in manufacturing. We worked a 3 on, 3 off schedule. I worked nights. Weekends were our big money weeks. In order to attend a drill weekend, I'd have to miss work Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday night. I would lose about $600 for attending drill. Occasionally, we could be approved for missing drill as long as we made it up during that month, or we could just take no pay for drill and miss those dates toward credible retirement. At some point, leadership decided that all PT failures would take a PT test every month until they passed. Failure to show up for a PT test would be an automatic forfeiture of pay and retirement points. Eligibility for retirement was based on having a good year. A good year was 50 points. Each UTA was 1 point. Annual training was 15 points, leaving 35 points needed from drill weekends. In a year, I could miss 3 drill weekends, and as long as I made all the rest, I was eligible for a good year. I saved those excused drills for the weeks that I was scheduled to work Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so I wouldn't lose the $600 difference from my civilian job and drill pay. Now, back to those mandatory PT tests every weekend. Leadership decided that we couldn't miss the scheduled training, so the PT test would be held before drill at 5:30 a.m. at an armory 30 miles further away from my unit's armory. To be at the PT test armory on time for the test meant that I had to get up at 3:30 a.m., get dressed, drive almost 2 hours, then do the test. Cue malicious compliance. If I was going to be inconvenienced by this idiocy, so was my score. I would show up for the test, sign in, do 1 push-up, 1 sit-up, 1 lap, and call it good. Drive to my unit and report that I failed the PT test, and go to work and still get paid. Every month. My first sergeant pulled me aside one day and asked what was going on. He said he knew I could pass the test. I explained that I already passed the test, but that the lieutenant never passed kindergarten counting. If they wanted to hold the PT test during duty hours, I'd be more than happy to try to pass, but there was zero incentive for me to do so as long as I had to drive 2 hours to take the test at 5:30 a.m. Another drill weekend, it snows quite a bit and it slows my drive down, so I get to the PT test a few minutes after it started. The LT in charge said it was too late and I couldn't start now. Okay, whatever. Drive to my unit to report in that I wasn't allowed to take the test. And then I'm informed I'm getting an unsat for refusing to do the PT test and wouldn't be paid for that UTA. Okay, if I'm not being paid, I'm leaving and will be back in 4 hours. Nope, if you leave, you'll get another unsat. I realize then, that means I don't have a good year. I'll only have 49 points. Screw it, I quit then. I had over 18 years in, re-enlisted for 6 more right before the failed PT test that I passed, and I just walked away. No more stupid chicken crap and no more losing money. In years past, some National Guard units were known to carry soldiers on their rolls. The unit would report that the soldiers were present for duty when they were not, and unit administrators would pocket their pay or create company slush funds. Sometimes, those soldiers were almost ready to collect pensions and were kicked out, and the state saved those pension payments. Now, after 18 years, soldiers are locked in and units are unable to discharge them. You can quit, like I did, and ask for a discharge, and the National Guard Bureau will kick it back, denying it like they did with me. I still had 4 years on my current enlistment. They wouldn't and couldn't release me. Meanwhile, the State National Guard Bureau would get a report of soldiers not showing up for drill. My name kept appearing. Uncomfortable questions were asked why someone with all this time in my rank would just walk away. My situation became an embarrassment for the state. How are they going to get my name off this report every month? Why did this happen? How did we fail a soldier with 1 year left until retirement eligibility? A friend of mine was a senior NCO, and in one of those meetings, he raised his hand and volunteered a way to get me off this list and not do anything illegal or fraudulent. I was transferred to his unit, and I attended drill at this unit just a few miles from my house on my days off during the week and reported to him. All I needed was 50 points, and that would give me a good year and I could retire with my 20 years in. I could also do military correspondence courses for retirement points, which wasn't available when I quit. When I attended enough UTAs and completed the courses, I got my 50 points. I received my eligibility for retirement letter, and I promised my friend that he could have half of it. Unfortunately, my friend passed away at age 55, a year or so after he finally retired after 30 plus years in uniform. At his funeral, another retired senior NCO spoke and reflected on my friend's ability to think outside the box and referenced my situation. Yes, I'm happily collecting my pension, but I'll never forget him and what he did for me. This one's tough for OP because he did the hard work that was required, trained and passed that test, but got denied over not being able to count to 8. Then he drove 2 hours to drop this malicious compliance. 2 hours, one way, and then finally that broke that camel's back with that straw, and then everything came crumbling down and OP took the win and the pension and retirement. Way to go, OP. Bizarre safety procedures at work cause a hilarious Cobra effect, posted by Artificer9. I'm a senior electrical engineer in the industrial sector. I started work at a huge firm a few weeks ago, and right off, my superior detailed what was expected of me every quarter. Among the requirements were 1 safety violation report a month. I thought, okay, I could keep myself from messing up more than once a month. This is a large factory with everything from spinning grinders to steaming corrosives, so obviously OSHA is a big issue here. But this isn't my first rodeo, so to speak. I generally know what I'm doing. So my first month goes by and I keep everything nice and safe. End of month one-on-one rolls around. Boss makes it clear, to my surprise, that the requirement is for me to file at least 1 safety violation a month. Obviously, I inquired how one could go about controlling safety violations as they are inherently accidents, and if I had any way to influence their appearance, I would prevent them in the first place. But he just said, I need to keep my eyes open, the violations will appear. Fine, I kept my eyes open, but honestly, everything seems perfectly in order. Everyone else in my department were ticking off safety violations one after another, and I was nearing the end of month 2 with nothing. I would go on walks looking for safety infringements instead of working. Something seemed off, so I looked into the safety violations report Excel and I was just stupefied. This was a list of the most unbelievably inane infractions I've ever set my eyes upon. I'll give you some examples. Infraction: cabinet door was left open in room. Someone could hit their head. Immediate mitigation: cabinet door closed. Future mitigation: add magnets to cabinet doors. There were countless other esoteric reports like unexplained puddle next to electrical cabinet or stack of cables on floor. I couldn't believe it. These well-educated, grown men and women just writing nonsensical safety violations on absolutely anything. I tried approaching one of the guys about it, but he just said to keep my eyes open, the violations will appear. They keep repeating it like it's a mantra and then change the subject. I thought this was ridiculous enough, but then one day a report came in about a ladder missing one of the plastic caps on its legs. Immediate mitigation: plastic cap found elsewhere and secured in its place. Now, I was the last one to use this ladder the day before, and it was perfectly fine, which led me to my conclusion that this man was purposely sabotaging company equipment just so he can fix it and then write a safety violation report. I feel like I'm in an episode of The Office. Everyone I approach about this just brushes it off. Maybe it's because I'm the new guy? Anyway, I couldn't show up to my second monthly evaluation, sans safety report, so I went to a random grounding cable, slightly unfastened the bolt, took a picture, and then fastened it back in place. I wrote a report about it, and the OSHA guy commended me in person about my vigilance. Is this a department-wide grift? Are the managers unaware of this farce, or are they playing along? Usually, this would be a huge red flag, but everyone is otherwise really nice and the pay is great. Anyway, ideas as to what I should sabotage next month are welcome. I have never in my life heard of something that wanted to have safety violations. And what do you expect is going to happen when you tell someone you want them to report danger when if they don't, they're in trouble? They're going to make silly little dangers that don't even really matter instead of working just like this. And I think it's a numbers thing. They just want to have this number that somebody doesn't know what they're doing, what they're keeping up with. They're just like, hey, we need this metric. And then people are like, oh, okay, here you go. OP, you maliciously complied and you did it really well. Way to go. You know your rights? Okay, go for it. Posted by Yin 1969. Background: my ex and I were 3 months into separation as I kept suggesting divorce agreements, trying to find what she would accept other than take her back and return to being a doormat for her. I have a good head for legal documents, and I understood very early that, as much as I would prefer to just burn everything down and disappear, legally, it was very likely I was going to be paying alimony, and she was entitled to a fair share of everything. But in a no-fault state with no gender preferences, it did mean a fair share. It was clear that legally I would not get an approval for an agreement heavily biased in her favor. So I kept reworking and sending possible divisions, every few days for months. She would object to anything that put any responsibility on her, anything that left something of value out of her hands. Anytime I asked her what terms she would be okay with, she would just derail the conversation to something else. Not long into this, I realized that I would need a paper trail, so everything went to email only. Through all of this, I had recognized too that a court would order spousal support, so there wasn't any point in just cutting her off financially. Not a total doormat at this point though. I had moved my direct deposit to a solo account and kept up her weekly cash flow and kept paying her bills. But my final offer in this period was the heavily unbalanced offer of splitting the cars, one to each, me taking all the debt, including her student loans, paying her $3,000 to $4,000 a month for a year so she could get her feet under her, and she gets all the stuff. I walk away with my car, my dogs, some tools, and some clothes. No go. Not good enough for her. And so we get to the meat of the story for the malicious compliance. 3 months in, I finally get her to agree to a mediator since I'm getting nowhere. She shows up to the initial meeting, the first time we have seen each other in a while, the second time since splitting. She was staying with her sister. The mediator starts out with the rules of mediation and the agreements to sign. I sign easily. She balks, but signs it finally. One of the relevant terms is that we agreed to not file any other legal paperwork. We would come to an agreement and the mediator would file the final court papers on both of our behalf to get the divorce ordered. The mediator starts asking basic questions, and every question to either of us results in my ex launching into an irrelevant topic attempting emotional manipulation of me or him. I quickly resolved to gray rock her directly and only direct my interactions to the mediator. I do my best to ignore her off-topic ramblings and reply to the mediator when she briefly crossed relevancy, like someone falling from a tree and briefly being stopped by various branches on the way down. The peak was when she literally crawled on top of the big table to stick her face in mine to force me to see her and engage in her ranting. The mediator called it quits at that point. He reminded her of the rules she agreed to, gave us homework to fill out, and had us schedule the next meeting with his clerk 2 weeks out. 3 days later, I get served with a summons to court for a hearing over spousal support. The summons shows the claim my ex made that all I had received from her in 3 months was $130. Oh boy, not true at all, not to mention in violation of the mediator terms. I end up on a conference call with the ex and the mediator as he tells her that she needs to withdraw the complaint or mediation can't continue. She adamantly insists that she knows her rights. So, the mediator ends his involvement, cuts us refund checks minus time worked so far, and exits stage left. I prepare for the hearing. I print out 3 months of bank statements and highlight every transfer to her, every bill paid on her behalf, every ATM withdrawal by her card, over 100 toll bills I received from her just driving through express lane tolls, so I got the elevated license plate fee mailed to me. $13,000 in change. You missed a couple zeros in your complaint, I thought. My final stack of paper was rather thick, so I made and printed an Excel spreadsheet summary for the cover sheet. I also looked up the spousal support rules again. It is 40% of the difference between the income goes from the higher paid to the lower paid. Some little wiggle room, but that's it. Simple. She was currently getting up to 72% of my pay once you factored her bills in. This court hearing was a good thing. Not as good as a mediator and fast resolution, but I wasn't likely to end up screwed more here. Not to mention, I had some daydreams of her finding out what lying on court documents might do. Court date rolls around. I show up to court, waiting in the hall outside the family law section. She shows up and plops herself next to me to start going off on me again. I try to ignore her, and then to keep from engaging, I start a written transcript of her ranting using the back cover of my paperwork folder. Finally, she realized what I'm doing and ends the ranting with, "Oh, I guess you're writing what I'm saying so you can make your friends hate me." They needed no encouragement. She huffs a few seats away and is quiet the rest of the time we waited. The court officer, not a judge, just someone authorized to handle it since it's a simple and clear legal process, finally comes to get us, and we head in. The officer starts the legal speeches, yada yada, and then asks my ex if she has anything to add to the complaint. She launches into a roller coaster speech proclaiming all my bad faults, some of which were real, and how mean I was to try and divorce her, and how I obviously didn't need any of the money I made because he is just going to live somewhere simple and cheap anyway. Yeah, her words. The court officer returns to the present like someone climbing down from the kitchen table after seeing a rat run by, and she asks me if I have anything I'd like to say. She can see the stack of paper and eyeballs it as she is talking. I hand over the stack, tell the officer that the summary sheet on top should help clear up the financial points in question, and just verbally start going through the items. At each one, my ex interrupts to give a reason why that item shouldn't count. Every single one. The officer keeps asking her to stop interrupting, but to no avail. We finally finish the list. The officer is shaking her head slightly and says, "Mr. Yin, this court process is to ensure that both parties are doing the right thing, so all of the," and gestures to encompass the stack of paper, "needs to stop right now. We will garnish your paychecks for the amount specified by law and send that to her instead." I know it's a win. I knew it was going to be. She didn't. She sat there all smug as we get into the calculations. I asked for a couple of adjustments to keep the amount of her car payment since I co-signed, and I wanted to be sure that the bill was paid. I expected that she would refuse or overspend on other stuff and be unable to pay it. I didn't want to give her the power to trash my credit. The officer agreed. I then asked to keep the insurance payment amount too for much the same reason, also agreed by the officer. My ex continued to be smug. I know she was thrilled at the idea of getting a court check directly. It sure would show me. Everything wrapped up. We got the totals, signed papers, and I handed over a check for the first payment, and the officer got up to make copies of everything. I asked the officer if I could wait in another room while she did, and got an agreement with a bit of side-eye at my ex. I got my paperwork first, with the officer saying it might take a few minutes for her to get her paperwork, but you're free to go. I got the hint and left immediately. I had parked a few streets away anyway, another barrier if she couldn't park near me. I got in my car and immediately called my cell carrier and canceled her phone. Does she want to set up her own plan? I can't answer that. I'm obeying a court order to remove her from my accounts. Okay. And worked down the remaining subscriptions I was paying for that she used. I even had the bills in front of me from court with account numbers and customer service numbers right there. I was done and driving home when she started blowing up my phone with incoming emails demanding to know what I was doing. Then texts from her sister's phone. Then calls. I just grinned and didn't answer any of them. She stopped after an hour or so and gave me a few hours of silence. Then, an all-caps email with a screenshot of the Netflix inactive account message. Oh my gosh, even Netflix! I admit, I giggled. The fallout wasn't over though. A month later, after she realized how much less she has from me after winning her case, she files an appeal. It is denied due to lack of reason. A month later, she files a complaint that I wasn't paying her car payment. Just an excuse to get into court. I had been paying it, and I was also pretty confident that, even if I hadn't, she didn't know how to get into that loan's account. She legally could, just never had cared to learn how. I had a lawyer at this point, and we both go to court. She is going to join by phone. The officer paused before calling and tells my lawyer, "This lady is a piece of work." The validation of that statement will always remain with me. The call goes predictably. My ex makes irrelevant rants. The officer keeps shutting her down and finally asks my ex for proof that I wasn't paying the car payment. And as she is holding statements and check images proving I had. My ex nearly screams, "I just know he isn't, so he can hurt me." The officer replies, "I am holding proof that he has paid it and is satisfying his legal obligation. The complaint is dismissed. Thank you," and hangs up on my ex. Divorce took another 10 months, lots more crazy, teaches her newbie lawyer a hard lesson, and I walked away with even less alimony than the spousal support and only about 60% of the debt. I lost my dogs to her though, my only regret in the outcome. One is certainly past old age limits now, the other is in that range. I still miss them. See, I think this is great malicious compliance because it is a purely great example of the OP sticking to the book, knowing everything to the letter, I's dotted, T's crossed, knowing that I can bring this argument and it will support and stand on here, and she was just going in blind, angrily letting that madness and anger be her judge and guide, not the pure, cool-headed, clear thoughts of OP. Way to go, man. Heavy Metal Finance by Sino. Quite a few years ago now, in the late 1990s and very early on in my career, I used to work for a company that helped customers of certain retail stores manage their finances. My role was a sort of compliance officer, ensuring that the staff who dealt with customers were following the rules. If they messed it up, it was a big problem and could potentially impact the customer's credit score, result in them defaulting on payments, and even end up in court. I took my job pretty seriously. The company was not particularly well run from a management perspective. They'd made a lot of money very quickly and had grown from a handful of people in a garage to a 4-story building in the CBD within the space of a year and a half. There wasn't a great deal in the way of policy or process framework, so I had to develop a lot of the tools to do the job myself. This involved some programming, a basic system to track what I was doing, link to the extensive rule set, and automate some of the more tedious reporting. It would also track how long I was spending on each task so that I could see about which elements I could streamline. Now, I was quite proud of this system and called it Hendrix, as I'm a massive Jimi Hendrix fan, and it used to play about 5 seconds of the instrumental version of Little Wing when it started up. As I had my own little room, cupboard, this never used to annoy anyone. I can geek out about that type of stuff. At this point, before corporate IT became rather more rigid, I used to write a lot of my own tools. I was the only person who was using Hendrix, and it was just a tool for me. My manager, the archetypal middle manager, decided that because it allowed you to quickly reference which rules applied to which situation, it should be rolled out to all staff. Now, I had previously considered this, but I argued that I couldn't guarantee that it would be fit for task because I'd designed it for my own use, and I'd need to make some changes first. But he rolled it out anyway, without me even getting a chance to tweak it. He got a Team Player of the Week award for introducing a tool to make life easier for frontline staff. In his acceptance speech, this was a big rah-rah thing each week for the company, he thanked his manager. I didn't even get a mention. Then, 2 weeks later, he realized that I'd been recording how long I had been working on certain tasks within the program. Now, I'd realized fairly quickly that this part of the program was a little too detailed, and I didn't really care too much about every single task within each incident. So, I just used it to record how long I spent on the entire incident, rather than each part of the incident. My manager invited me to a meeting about Hendrix, no details given, and I attended thinking it was going to be a list of requested features, only to find out that the head of HR was there and I was being given a written warning for falsifying timekeeping. Because each customer interaction was a certain length, my manager had decided that this was what I should be recording, and not how long I was spending listening to, analyzing, checking, and reporting on the interaction. Remember, this is a tool that I had designed for my own use, and it was not being used to calculate how much I was being paid or whether I was doing enough work during the day or not. There was nothing in place for that at all. I had not made the records public. He'd found them in a file on the server that only he and I had access to. Nobody else was supposed to even have this tool. I argued this and was told that it wasn't up to me, and I was getting a warning regardless. It got really quite heated and unpleasant, though I got the impression that the head of HR was a little embarrassed about the whole thing. They said, however, that if I wanted to consult a lawyer, I was quite within my rights to do so. It was at this point that I was rather smugly able to state that I could get 2 lawyers there within the hour, as both my parents were practicing, and my mother was, in point of fact, an employment lawyer. I realize this is a bit of a deus ex machina, but it only has a partial bearing on the story. Suddenly, there was a completely different attitude from my manager. There was an attempt to roll back the issue and turn it into a suggestion that perhaps I should be a bit more careful with my timekeeping in the future. But I was pretty angry at this point. I pointed out that my software had been rolled out to all staff against my wishes. I was told that this wasn't up to me, as it was company intellectual property, until I advised them that I had written it in my own time, at home on my own computer. It was plugging into the official government rule set and not the corporate intranet one. I had not confirmed it fit for general release at all. I had received special dispensation from IT to install it on a single work computer, mine, and I would require them to pay a license fee for anything beyond this. Now, to be fair, this would have been tied up in court for a long time, and I've got no idea whether I'd been successful, so in the end, I relented. If they wanted to use Hendrix, well, I guess they could. I just made sure that Little Wing would play for 1 second longer on startup for every week the software was in use. Then I quit the following Monday and was working for another company by the Monday after that. 3 or 4 months later, I got a phone call from my former manager asking to come fix the problems with my software. He hung up when I quoted him my consultant fees. I don't know why IT weren't able to figure it out. It was just a setting in a text file, not at all hard to find. A friend who remained in the company tells me that they continued to use Hendrix for a whole year. The mornings in the call center were apparently horrifying, with Little Wing playing for around a minute every time someone started a new shift. Sometimes it would play on 20 computers at once, a few seconds apart, on tinny PC speakers that they were unable, due to IT, to mute. See, I really like this story because I'm a rock and roll guy myself, and this is malicious compliance that is just fun, right? It plays for 1 second longer every time, and that is just so hilarious because as it's on the machine longer, it's more and more, but it's little by little, 1 second here and there. You're not going to notice it, right? Until it's like a year later and it's just blaring. It's perfect because it's so fun, right? It's a rock and roll song, 1 second longer each time. It's just a fun malicious compliance. Way to go, OP. You demanded my entire team be at the office for the 4th of July. Fine, enjoy paying for the office party, posted by the Lightning Count 1. So this starts on a Monday, the 13th, as I receive an email from a VP not over my department, or bad VP. I'm told that my team will be required on the 4th. I politely tell them that no, our team has been scheduled this day off and people already have plans. My team is the IT team, and as many of you know, IT team gets, shafted every time that it can get shafted by, any company. So over the course of the week, I let my team know what's happening. I let them know that I've been reaching out to higher ups to fix it, and I also tell them that if their plans are ruined, I'll make it right at work. Over the course of 3 meetings, it starts to look like things will not go my way. In response, I send an email to the CEO of the company. All of my higher ups know that I was going to do this and said that I should do this, as he is very family oriented and that he would not allow anyone to work on a national holiday. Well, he's on vacation in the Bahamas until the 6th, but his assistant informed me that he would look at this after he gets back. I repeatedly slammed my head into the desk. So I tell everyone that it'll be work from home and that we'll be setting my cell phone as priority in the call routing, meaning that I would get most of the calls. To be honest, I was expecting almost 0 calls, especially since I was asked to send out a notification that IT support would cover the 4th of July. I never sent that email out. A day later, I was given another outrage. I was told in an email that my employees would be required to be at the office and no one was allowed to work from home. They would be checking the door badge ins to verify that we were at the office. I asked why in an email, and they said that they wanted to make sure no one was playing video games at work. We normally work from home about 2/3 of the week, and video game playing is a normal occurrence at work. So I walked into the person's office, and after a very long conversation where she was losing the logic war with me, she told me that it's just IT, you guys don't even have lives. No, I'm not kidding you, that's exactly what they told me. I reported this to my VP, who said, I'll take care of this, it likely won't be until after the 4th, so get creative. I know this man well. We have worked together for a long time, and get creative is code word for corporate screwery. I asked the person requiring us to be at the office if they cared if we had an office party. They said no, as long as it didn't interfere with the call flow. Even suggested using my new company card to pay for it. Go wild. Pro tip, never tell me to go wild. At this point, it was Tuesday the 21st. I let everyone know what's up, but that I have something planned. I asked who had things planned for that day, and 2 people told me that they were planning to shoot off fireworks with their family, but the rest were planning barbecues with friends. I write up an email to the VP over my department and the bad VP. I tell them all that I had let everyone know. We all were expected to work until 8 p.m. on Monday. Per the conversation with the bad VP, I'll be having an office party as sort of a sorry to the guys and the gals who got shafted by this decision. The bad VP replied again, thank you for your understanding. Also, yes, I would expect an office party if I had to work on the 4th of July as well, so go wild and enjoy your time. Use your new company credit card if you need to cover a few expenses. Also, I should not have to remind you or anyone else. No fireworks or alcohol on company property. So now it's time to tell you about my office. See, a while back, the IT team was moved from the main corp office and into a smaller building by itself. It has a nice gaming break room, a decent-sized gym, and a full-on drink bar. Soft drinks, mind you, no alcohol at work. Out back is a big patio that crosses county lines as soon as you cross a small creek. A creek that just so happens to have a footbridge over it, leading to an empty field. I start making phone calls. Monday, June the 25th. I call up everyone into an hour early meeting that morning, and I explain to them all that I will be making it right. I asked everyone to invite their friends and the family to the office. No supplies will need to be brought by anyone. Now I tell them all that this will be non-alcoholic, but that I will be planning something for everyone. I told them to expect all food to be provided, and they don't need to bring anything unless they want to bring some fireworks, i.e. they won't have to spend a dime. The 4th comes, and the entire day we did absolutely no work. No tickets, no calls came in. Well, 7 calls did come in, but from the same person, the bad VP. She was calling to make sure we were manning the phones. All of us were playing video games or watching movies. 6 p.m. rolls around, and everyone was told that the food was ready. People were expecting hot dogs, hamburgers, maybe a bratwurst or two, and what they got was a full-on barbecue feast with pizza and other foods. There was smoked brisket, spare ribs, smoked sausage, smoked turkey, both kinds of tater salad, coleslaw, green beans with bacon and onion, potatoes au gratin, pizza from 2 different places, excellent hamburgers, and bratwurst hot dogs. On the dessert side was cake, very good cookies, 4 different kinds of pies, and about 2 pounds of fudge. Families and friends started showing up at around 6:15ish. Some brought alcohol, but I told them that they would need to leave that in their cars as I was not that crazy. Some were not too happy about that, but agreed as it was a free dinner for random strangers. So let me set the scene for you. I'm out there with all the calls routed to my cell phone, and everyone just having a good time. We have a ton of people that are just there enjoying the fun night, chatting about random stuff, eating the food, and occasionally lighting off some sparklers or throwing firecrackers into the stream. It's not stocked and it's only like 1 foot deep. My VP, not the bad VP mind you, showed up with his family, brought some water balloons for the kids and man-children. Around 8:30ish, it's getting dark and people want to shoot off more than the simple sparklers and the firecrackers that we'd been using. The VP over the IT department had everyone cross the footbridge, over county line, and off company property, mind you, and we set up a big wooden board using it as our launch pad. We fired off what we had for about an hour or two and sort of just hung out for a little while. At around this time, people were tired and ready to head home. I told people just take home leftovers within reason. We all clocked out at around 8 and no one left until about 10:30. The bad VP did call once more while we were out back at the party, and it was 7:50 and she called asking for a status update. My exact words were, "Well, you were the only one to call us today. The rest of us are on the back patio enjoying the 4th of July shindig." She simply acted like my boss and said, "As long as no alcohol or fireworks are on company property, I do not care." We ate roughly half of the food catered. The rest was taken home. A small group volunteered to stay behind to clean up, including my VP. We had a funny conversation about how this is going to make waves with the bosses, but he said that he had my back and asked me how much this cost. I just gave him a sideways look, which made him laugh. Tuesday morning, I submitted the expense report to my VP. This email would inevitably make its way over to the bad VP and up the chain to the CIO of the company. It would be a bad idea to give out the exact cost of the party, mind you, but I can tell you that because of this 4th of July party, new rules were put into place. Any expenses of over $4,000 or more must be approved by the direct supervisor, VP over the department, and the full expense report must be sent to the financial department for review after the fact. Hint, the party cost over $6,000. The barbecue was the most expensive part. I didn't order from like a low or a mid-tier place because the place that I ordered from has consistently been on top 10 in the DFW listing for the last 30 years. I ate at that place so much that I made friends with the owner. The best barbecue that I have ever had. The pies and the cakes were custom made by a bakery, and the cookies were made by a boutique cookie place. I had like 10, 12 packs of Coke, Coke Zero, Dr. Pepper Zero, Pepsi, Pepsi Zero. I bought 5 pepperoni, 5 sausage, 5 cheese, 2 Hawaiian, and 3 cheeseburger pizzas from one place, and nearly the same number from another place. Excluding the cheeseburger ones, I subbed out those for a different specialty pizza from the other place. The burgers were from an excellent burger place that did catering. I know that owner well. He brought his kids for the night of fun after he'd heard what was going to be happening, and he was also the one who brought the brat dogs as he recently added those to his menu. This was the most expensive office party in the history of the company. The only things more expensive than this were some business meetings that the CEO rented private rooms in high-end restaurants for. As for the CEO, he was outraged. Not at the cost of the party, mind you. He knew the party would not have been necessary if people had been allowed to go home. He was outraged that IT was the only group required to work on that day. When I submitted the log showing how we received no real phone calls, no service requests, and that we basically watched movies and played video games during our shift, he'd heard enough. He apparently sent out a scathing email about work-life balance and the importance of our holidays to every upper management. It's kind of funny, as people wanted me to get in trouble for what I did, but the reality is other departments have done similar things in the past, just not on the scale that IT did. The bad VP was admonished quite effectively and sent me an apology email. I forwarded it to the team with a strong hint to not reply. Then my VP let the CIO and the CEO know about what the bad VP said. You guys don't have lives. The bad VP did actually confirm that she said it in a meeting with her EVP. It did not go over well. I've never heard people yelling in an office meeting like that before. I mean, the CEO of the company came to our office and yelled at her. I'm not sure if she was fired, but she is not at work today. In an Active Directory, she does not have the down arrow of death, so not 100% of what happened to her. I know that she lost whatever clout she had at this company with her attitude. If anything more happens, I will update. But so far, it looks like the fallout from this is that I caused a new rule to be put into place about how much you're allowed to spend at one time. The bad VP may or may not be let go or forced to resign, but I know she got yelled at. Strangely, there is now no longer any pushback for my bid to get everyone back to working from home. Oh, this is not just one of those by-the-books malicious compliances. No, nay, it is not. It is, hey, you can have a party if you want to. Oh, you want me to spend as much as I want to? Thousands of dollars, over $6,000, causing a new rule to be put into place. This did not just have a huge party that impacted the company. It actually changed the policy and the future of the rules of the company from this one incident, all because they wanted them to work. They knew that, hey, this is not the best idea for the company. They were forced to do it anyway, and they maliciously complied to make this party happen. Way to go, OP. $6,000 in all. Print out the internet? Yes, ma'am. Posted by Sign Savings 9270. This is about a decade ago, but still well within the realm of the internet. I was a technical writer for the government and had slowly been transferring our old employee handbook, I think like government bureaucracy from the 1940s, into a modern and actually useful doc. Think one page with our policies and links to useful websites like the Office of Personnel Management, forms for workman's comp, and so on. My boss wanted the whole thing printed out on her desk the next morning. This was Monday of the Thanksgiving weekend. I printed out the 200 or so pages and just had the links to the various websites in bold. This took about an hour and I left it on her desk before going home that night. She calls me in her office on Tuesday afternoon and proceeds to yell at me at how stupid I am. Do I think that people can just go to a website when it's on paper? No, I need to print everything out. I calmly tell her that these sites are pretty dense and deep and it would be about 10,000 pages. She says she does not care, it needs to be on her desk, dang it, first thing Monday morning. Mind you, this is now Tuesday and we usually had some of Wednesday off. I was not really planning to work Thursday, Thanksgiving, or Friday as I had applied for leave and I was looking forward to, well, a nice relaxing long weekend. I don't have family, but I had plans. But okay, whatever. I asked for and I got the request to have everything pertaining to the employee handbook online in a printed format. I also had real work and real deadlines. A quick bit of context. She was my boss, and she did my performance appraisals, and she could make my life, well, miserable and possibly fire me. However, my clients were teams that put together engineering plans, biological assessments, scientific journal articles, reports to Congress, and so on that had real-world deadlines. On some of these, if you missed the publication date, your agency paid $100,000 a day in delay fees. Or you would tick off a congressperson, which is, well, never a good idea. And I was really getting sick and tired of my boss's requests that took me away from my actual work. So I was printing and printing all the rest of Tuesday afternoon and then Wednesday. I had to go to the site, print, click on the next link, print, and so on. On Wednesday, we got a congressional, which is a letter from a Congress critter that was actually important. Had we not gotten that, I might not have done what I did. I got overtime approved pronto to take care of this request, so I did work Thanksgiving. As I was doing that, I kept on printing and printing. I used up every sheet of paper in our 14-story building. I kept on researching the response for the congressional, printing, going to the next floor to carefully get that packet of paper to tuck under the appropriate page, and so on. I had paper in about 20 different conference rooms. I could have done the congressional in about 8 hours, but it was not due until Monday. And all of this printing took me a good 24 hours of work. So I put in for 32 hours Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I got it done. This is now 2 stacks of paper, each about 6 feet high. I was way under in my estimate of 10,000 pages, as it was more like 30,000. Now remember, I had at least 5 printers going at once for 4 days and such. I put this in my boss's office, which was already none too clean and pristine. I got written up with a disciplinary hearing and everything. The charge was malicious compliance. I kept my job only because I did have her request in an email. Update and explanations. I did not expect this to get more than a few hundred views, so thank you all for reading and being amused. A few explanations from questions in the comments. I kept my job only because, I say that because the boss was very upset and was going to HR demanding that I be put on a performance improvement plan, or a PIP, where she could then take her revenge and create other issues that would have gotten me fired. I was probably not in danger of being fired, like simply for this action, but I was not put on a PIP. I was given a disciplinary letter, so the only actual fallout was that I could not get a bonus, which we get $1,000 bonuses if our performance is above average. I would have been okay in an RIF, as this is a mild punishment. Yes, the charge actually and literally was malicious compliance. That was what was written on the disciplinary letter. She could not get me on anything else. She had not set any limits, like you can only spend X hours, you can only print out X amount of materials, blah, blah, blah. And I had her instructions in an email to print out the handbook and all the pertaining information from the websites. I don't remember the exact wording, and I probably should have kept that all these years, but when I left the government after 3 decades, I pretty much threw out everything. The 2 6-foot stacks were not just the paper printouts. See, the handbook covered everything, and it was more of an intranet in itself. Now, I'd been working on this project for a long time in my spare time. See, the handbook, it covered everything. So in short, it was a well-organized intranet where you could quickly find exactly what you needed and no more. I had human resources policies on leave and tardiness, all the disciplinary actions, retirement, health insurance, taxes, transfer requests, and so on. How to write all types of reports like planning reports, facility review reports, congressionals, and so on, along with all the templates for the reports. You got project management, public involvement processes, and so on. Every position description, and how to write performance reviews, award letters, and so on. I mean, there's emergency procedures for particular buildings and so on, how to conduct and write a job hazard analysis for any type of work on the facility. I mean, there was absolutely no reason to print this out. And my boss never gave me a reason. I'd been arguing against printing this for at least a year before my boss gave me the order to even print the 200 pages that I had in the first place. I mean, these 200 pages each briefly explain the situation. So for example, like why we do a job hazard analysis, what it should cover, and who should do one. And then it gave links, so for example, to the Word template that you could download and use, and to some good examples. So I'd already had a lot of material that I just put into piles. So the piles look like, say, an index tab with a sticky for the topic, a sheet of the paper explaining the concept, a ream of the paper printing out the internet with all of the pages with the related links neatly put into a notebook, pre-printed examples of templates, reports, blah, 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 so on. So we did have a printing unit off-site, so the major jobs were printed there. Thus, we did not have that many copiers in the building, so 1 per floor. And yes, before you ask, my boss could have asked the copy unit to do the work, but the copy unit would only print things that were already in a pre-approved PDF format. They would not have printed the internet for my boss. Yes, my boss kept her job. She was promoted soon after from being the group manager of about 15 people to being the deputy chief of a division of several hundred people. Yes, I worked at the same job, technical writer, for 30 plus years. First off, I loved what I did. I was good at it. And I never wanted to go into management and deal with people headaches myself. Second off, I needed the health insurance and I wouldn't have been able to get a private company job because of my underlying handicap. So staying put in the government and doing what I loved worked out well for me. And I was quite effective at my job. I wrote documents that allowed decision makers to understand complex issues and make good decisions, employees use and protect our facilities, and so on. My colleagues respected me and we worked well together. Yes, this is the US federal government, and we did have a very ineffectual union where only a few people were allowed to be bargaining unit members, and the union could have done very little to save my job. Thanks for reading my funny little story. This is next level MC because they literally took the weekend, printed 30,000 pages. Do you know how much that is? Seriously, 30,000 pages in 100-page notebooks is 300 notebooks. That is literally massive, and to do the extreme, go to this level to get this MC done, not many people would have done that, and for that, I just commend you, OP, because you are an absolute star at what you did with this. Way to go. You want me to make a patient stay late so you can skip work during the snow, and you refuse to stay late? Fine, now you have to stay late every day. Posted by Deleted. Once upon a time, I worked in a research hospital coordinating drug studies. This one's going to go against the grain of some of the stories here. When you work in healthcare, following the written laws and rules to the letter is of the utmost importance. We run into trouble when people begin inventing their own rules and playing by them. The hardest part of my job was convincing other departments to also do their jobs, and sometimes it was like pulling teeth asking people to perform their duties at even a basic level. Ask a nurse to draw a basic 4-2 blood kit, you got an eye roll. Ask the pharmacy to stay 5 minutes past the end of the workday? Nope, they couldn't do that. They were out at 4:30. That second scenario is the important one for the purposes of this story. That department refuses to stay late. I can understand why they'd feel that way and strive to maintain as steady of a schedule as possible, but in the world of sick and dying people, sometimes things come up. Mind you, I regularly had to stay an hour or two past the end of my shift to take care of problems and data entry. We could get overtime pay or flex our schedules pretty easily, at least in my department. This hospital was in a very snowy metropolitan area, and one time years ago, we were projected to get a massive blizzard. Every one of us, the nurses, the physicians, the pharmacists, and the coordinators were essential employees, or whatever they called it before COVID popularized the term, and had to come in regardless of the weather. So, every one of us should have been planning to be there the next day, even if the weather was awful, and we had to call in sick if we missed work for weather reasons. The afternoon before the storm was due to begin, we had a patient in clinic. Typically, patients on this particular research study got a doctor's appointment and then treatment immediately after. However, this individual had a job that made him prefer getting his clinic visit done in the afternoon and his treatment early the next morning. It was unusual, but it wasn't hard to accommodate him. While most of us had accepted our fate of driving in the snow the next morning, the investigational drug department was especially not too excited about the prospect of having to come in during the blizzard. So, at 3:30, an hour before the pharmacy closes, they send me a Slack message and ask us what the possibility of doing this patient's treatment today might be so they don't have to come in for tomorrow. Really? You're asking us now? This was on your docket all day. Anyhow, I begrudgingly went to find the patient in the waiting room and ask. He wasn't thrilled, but he says he'll do it if he has to, and I'll let the pharmacy know. Then they asked me what the status of the patient was. Clinic was running behind, as usual, and we hadn't cleared the patient for treatment yet. The investigational pharmacy needed at least 20 minutes to prep the drugs needed, so they told us we had till 4 p.m. to get them the signed order. The process for getting a drug order filled involved getting a signed order from a doctor after a patient has been cleared to get a drug. Then you walk it outside across the street to the pharmacy. After that, you hand the signed prescription to a pharmacist, you wait for the drug, and then you walk it back to the patient in the first building. This was absolutely not going to happen in 12 minutes. At 4:01, pharmacy sent me a very rude Slack message indicating that I'd basically missed my window to get the patient in today and that I should do it better next time. Hey, as a coordinator, you get blamed for like absolutely everything, even if it was the fault of a doctor who was bad at time management. Their message said something along the lines of, if you don't come up and give a pharmacist the order by 4:05, there's nothing we can do for your patient. In the future, you should get the order signed and over to us ahead of time so we can prep it. Ahead of time. In this case, that meant the patient would have been prescribed a drug, but that wasn't yet cleared by the doctor to receive that drug. In my training, the pharmacy director told us that we were never ever supposed to do this. It was a humongous no-no and would be grounds for a massive lawsuit if anything went wrong. You absolutely don't prep a drug unless the patient receiving it is cleared for treatment by a physician. I really liked the pharmacy director, and I messaged her regularly with questions about drugs that patients might be considering while on study, but she wasn't super involved in the day-to-day of the pharmacy workers and tended to focus on bigger picture tasks, hence why her employees were inventing their own rules and demands. So I'm supposed to get this patient in today, right now, yeah? Alright, if you insist. So I got the order signed by the physician ahead of seeing the patient. They didn't really give a crap. Next step, in the words of the person who messaged me, was to take it to a pharmacist, yeah? You said I had to take it to a pharmacist by 4:05, right? What if, instead of walking it directly to the pharmacy, I took it directly to the pharmacy director? She was still a pharmacist and could do everything the folks in the investigational drug dispensary could do. I told her that we hadn't cleared this patient, but I'd been urged by the pharmacy to dispense the drug anyhow, so that the patient wouldn't have to come in tomorrow for their treatment. She looked puzzled and asked if the patient rescheduled while in clinic. I told her no, this was at the request of the pharmacy staff, so they wouldn't have to come in during a snowstorm. I showed her the message her employee had sent me. Pharmacy director was unhappy with this and said someone would just have to stay late if this was the plan. I referred her to the Slack message that said that I'd missed my window because they didn't plan to stay late. Director was livid and told me that she personally was going to stay late to make sure this went through. We went to the pharmacy from her office and she intended to scold this employee, but of course, everyone was gone. So the two of us went and got the drug at 4:35 and I got it back to the patient. I got a call from him a week later indicating that he actually preferred getting Thursday afternoon treatment instead of having it on Friday morning and wanted to keep that schedule going forward. I relayed this to the head of the pharmacy and I expressed uncertainty with how we'd handle this, and she said that she'd get back with me. We all got an email a few days later saying that the investigational drug department would now be staying open until 5:30 and one person would be staying late every day, rotating every day, so that someone could cover late drug orders. But I knew she only had 3 pharmacists and they were all salaried, not hourly, which meant some of them would be covering more than 1 late hour a week. I went to get this patient's next dose of drug a few weeks later at about 4:45. The same woman who'd asked me to break the rules was working. I asked how she was doing and she told me that she was having to work 3 4:30 to 5:30s a week, presumably because she tried to act unethically a few weeks prior. She handed me the pill bottle and slammed the window in my face. And to think, if the pharmacist would have just shut up and done their jobs like they were supposed to and come in during one snowstorm, they'd still be able to leave at 4:30 every day. If you work in healthcare or health research, don't make your own rules, kids. If there is one place you don't want to mess around with stuff, it is in healthcare. If something goes wrong, if you knowingly say, I am breaking this violating it, and then you do something, that patient gets hurt or killed, you are on the hook and you are absolutely messed over. You do not mess with healthcare. They trust you with their life and health, literally. If you mess with that, their trust is gone from you. That whole organization or clinic that they're at gets a bad name. If they're part of a network, that gets a bad. It's just, you don't mess with it. You just don't do it. Wait to go on this story and MCOP. Screw your HOA and its ridiculous rules. Posted by 321 Backup. Back in high school, I was all about my car. Don't get me wrong, it was a rolling POS, but it was my car. It had a trade-in value of maybe like $5, but it was my car. I was learning how to take care of it, by which I mean I found where the dipstick was and how to pull it. I hadn't yet moved on to tire inflation, one step at a time. Anyway, one day after school, I drove over to my friend's place. We jump out, pop the hood, pull the dipstick, check the oil, and it was fine. So we put the hood back down. I had no idea what an HOA was or what it meant. I was just a happy, ignorant teenager, eager to demonstrate how responsible I was with my wheels. A few days go by and we're hanging out at my friend's place when his mom comes home. She starts giving us the business in that I'm annoyed but trying not to be voice about a warning she received from the HOA regarding repairing cars in your driveway, complete with the photo of my POS with the hood up. Really, she was being pretty good, though clearly annoyed. Well, we explained that we weren't repairing anything. I was just checking the oil level and I didn't even need any tools. See, the picture just had the hood up. So she softened up quite a bit after that, and the focus of her annoyance shifted from us to the HOA, since it's entirely reasonable for anyone to check the level of oil in a car. Well, she finds a copy of the HOA rules, and we all read them together, and well, sure enough, there's a bylaw that says you can't repair a car in the driveway. I protest that I wasn't repairing anything, I was just checking the oil. Reading the exact rules on exactly what was forbidden sparked an idea. So I look at my friend, raise an eyebrow, and say, "Fight the power? Fight the power." I propose my plan to his mom and ask for permission since she's going to have to deal with the fallout. She's on board since she thinks this is supremely stupid, and we set in motion. Cue the malicious compliance. Every day after school, my friend and I drove our POS machines to his place, parked in their driveway, raised the hoods, and just looked at the engines. No tools, we weren't even near them. We didn't check the oil, we didn't so much as touch them nor wipe them down with a rag. All we did was expose them to the birds, the sky, and God above to just let them breathe. After a while, I got bored, so I started setting up an easel and drawing my engine, 10 minutes at a time. My friend had to one-up me, so he decided he needed some tasteful artistic photos with his engine. He judged the best photos would be him laying over the engine shirtless, stroking and fake kissing it. Just absurd, over-the-top, moronic high schooler stuff. Predictably, the HOA was on us like stink-on crap. The warnings quickly turned into fines, complete with pictures of both vehicles with their hoods up. Then more pictures with mine with its hood up and an easel in front. Then even more pictures with my friend's with his hood up, him laying in the engine compartment and me taking pictures of him with a camera. Soon enough, his mom let us know that it was time for the monthly HOA meeting. Of course, all three of us had to go in person to protest the fines. So the motley pair of us show up along with his mom and his mom's stack of fine notices. I bring along my engine drawing, and we printed some of my friend's engine photos larger than normal. After a while, it was new business time, and my friend's mom steps up. I'm pretty sure they expected her to play the "my son and his friend are morons, please make these fines go away since I don't know what they're doing" sympathy card. Nope, not a chance. She politely, but firmly, attested that she was being sent fines for something that wasn't in the bylaws and asked the board to stop. One of the board members spoke up, saying that working on cars was against the bylaws, and clearly that's what was going on since both the hoods were up. Oh, you should have seen their faces when she corrected them that the bylaw said no repairs were allowed, that there were no repairs going on in any of the pictures since no tools were visible, and that we were just doing art projects for school. Even longer faces were seen when she showed my, truthfully completely terrible, drawing of my engine, along with the date stamped a couple weeks ago pictures. And this was back when film cameras stamped a date directly on the picture, of my friend trying to seduce his engine. The HOA president called for a 5-minute recess, during which the board huddled in a corner of the room. After the recess, the president succinctly said, "Ma'am, we are going to dismiss all your fines. Have a nice evening." We dang near danced out of that meeting. Being the obnoxious crapheads that my friend and I were, we had to do the drawing and photo routine a few more times just to make sure they weren't going to start sending more fines. They wisely didn't, and being victorious, we soon found other ways to annoy them. All of this could have been avoided if they just looked at the pictures and saw, hey, there's no tools. Just because the hood's up doesn't mean it's being worked on. You're allowed by law to look at your car engine. I'm just pretty sure it was like 17 Karens on the board or something, right? Because they didn't get the full picture. They never do. And OP and friend maliciously complied with this malicious compliance, and they rocked it with their cars. Not today, posted by i3i2i. Jump in and hang on, friendly Redditor. This one's kinda long. My apologies. For your troubles, I'll give you 2 MCs for the price of 1. My now ex-boss was hired after me and relied heavily on me to run the department, which I did. Before his arrival, I ran the department by myself and had near complete autonomy. I only answered to the owner and his son. Since I was expected to do everything on my own, I was well versed in the contents of my job description, and I followed them to the letter. Once the new boss came on, our department got more responsibility to include other buildings on the property. Since I was previously not responsible for the other buildings, I decided to do an audit and inspection of the buildings just to make sure they were compliant with codes and regulations, blah blah blah. So one of the buildings was seriously non-compliant. They needed to either shut down the building and fix everything, or tear it down completely and start over. Since my job description specifically stated that I was to conduct audits and recommend building closures due to unsafe working conditions, that's exactly what I did, by email to my boss and senior management. Well, my boss had a fit. He said I never should have sent that email, and how dare I tell the owner what to do with his company, and so on and blah blah blah. I told him it was part of my job description, and I showed him the exact sentence. He didn't care, which ticked me off because it was employee safety we were talking about. I made a fairly big stink about how terrible it was that they cared more about the production than they did about safety. I got marched into a conference room with my boss and the HR manager, and they proceeded to berate me for 20 minutes about my unprofessionalism and my insubordination. I asked them how it was possible that I was being insubordinate when I was following my job description. They had no answer for that, and instead said they needed to see an increase in my performance, or else. From that day forward, my boss required me to send him a daily report of every single thing that I did, so he could make sure that I was doing my job to his expectation and that I didn't send inappropriate emails to the owner. Malicious compliance number 1. I sent him time-stamped emails for every single thing I did. 0701, read email from person. 0702, replied to person's email. 704, read email from other person. You get the idea. The first day, I sent him 119 emails of things I did, including my use of the bathroom. Now, on to the next. Remember when I said I knew my job description? One of the bullet points stated that I was expected to liaise with outside agencies to conduct inspections of the facilities to ensure compliance with local, state, and federal regulations. One such outside agency was the local fire inspector, who we knew was coming on a Friday. All the way up until Thursday evening, my boss was expecting me to accompany the fire inspector during the inspection. He even reassigned things on my calendar to make sure I was free on Friday morning. Friday morning arrived, and I was getting ready for the fire inspector. My boss came into the office and said, "I need you to hang out in the office today. Other person is going to do the walk with the fire inspector." It caught me by surprise, I'll admit it. I told him that it was specifically part of my job description to do the inspection, and I reminded him that he had recently told me to increase my performance. He said, "You're not doing it." I said, "Is it because you think that I'll report all of the deficiencies and get this place shut down?" No, it's not that at all. Just so I understand that you completely here, you're telling me that you don't want me to do my job. Not today. Here's the second MC, dear Redditor. I sat in my office and played games on my computer the entire day. I also made sure to comply with his daily email requirement at the end of the day. It was the only email I sent. 0730, computer work. 1600, left. This one's nice because this dude went the extra mile and a half by literally every single email documenting. That would take a lot of time and energy and kind of be actually really annoying, but OP knew that he had to do it to get the full malicious compliance in, and then topped it off with a full day of gaming on the back end after he couldn't do the fire inspector, which the boss said to do for his job. It's a double MC with an extra slice of spice on the side. Great job. That's all. Way to go, OP. Roommates set the thermostat to 50 degrees when it's 35 outside. Posted by CamoMaster74. For context, I share a 5-bedroom home with 4 other small families. My neighbors are from a Spanish-speaking country and don't know English very well. The language barrier is large between us. The way this house was built in 2015 does not allow for very good ventilation between rooms or floors. Additionally, the HVAC system does not have thermometers in each room. Instead, it's combined with a thermostat, one of which is located in the hall I share with my neighbors. It reads 68 degrees Fahrenheit or 20 degrees Celsius on average, but that's with both bedroom doors closed. Thus, the temperature in either one of our rooms can vary drastically. Since we share a thermostat, you can see where this is going. The landlord has expressed his wishes to keep the thermostat above 60 degrees as long as it's colder than that outside. Easy enough. Open the window when it's hot and close it when it's cold. My desk is next to both of our windows, so that's primarily been my responsibility. Both parties tend to avoid conflict, so we haven't discussed this face to face or even through text. Every so often, my roommate and I will notice that it's uncomfortably hot or cold. Every time we've checked the thermostat, it's been set to either 80 degrees or 50 degrees. Naturally, we set it back to heat around 64 degrees and cool to 70. Apparently, this does not suffice for our neighbors. They have been, over the past month, continuously setting the thermostat back to 50 degrees, even when it's been below 40 degrees outside. But here's the kicker. The AC wasn't even running until yesterday. The air coming out of the vents has been cold because most of our HVAC system is in an uninsulated garage. This knowledge was gifted to us by the landlord, who also doesn't speak Spanish, and he assumed that we would pass the information to our neighbors. Yet again, as predicted, they set the thermostat to 50 degrees. But this time, we let it run like that all night, making sure to grab all the blankets from the shared laundry room. Remember, when the temperature in a room changes while the door is closed, the thermometer can't tell until the door opens. They sleep with their door locked. So, all night, the HVAC system was blowing frigid air into their room. We woke up the next morning with the thermostat set to 66 to 70. Sweet, sweet victory. I know this is petty, but man, oh man, is it nice to have a comfortable temperature to sleep in. Hey, I'm just going to tell you right here, 70 to 72 is the perfect temperature. You can't let it drop to 69, or you can't let it go up to 73 plus. OP knows this, he knows the rules, what he likes, what he doesn't like. They communicated, didn't work out. OP says, hey, well, we're just going to make it right with Frigidaire, which is a brand of refrigerator, if you catch the reference that they make there. So OP, you know what you're doing, and you played freeze out with them. Way to go. Oh, you think the trade shows are actually vacations wrought with fraud, and you want to impose strict controls over a business you don't understand? Good luck. Posted by Punk Linux. Many years ago, I worked for a company that hired an incredibly obtuse financial department who took over when they first organized. It used to be a loose collection of managers, but the year after I started, they went for a more organized and separate structure. To be fair, this is more about my boss than myself. We had a travel team, a group of volunteers from sales and IT who would go en masse with equipment and techs to do setups, displays, and network at trade shows. We had a booth, some sales guys would be there, and networking would commence. There was always a set of volunteers from the IT department because some of the shows would be in big cities, and you get to attend vendor events, parties, and hang out with the sales guys who were mostly gay alcoholics for some reason, and super fun. There was a kind of seniority to who got to volunteer, but nobody really complained, and everyone got rotated who got to go. You got to go to DEF CON last year, it's my turn now. Okay, fair. The travel team lead was also a volunteer position, but commonly someone high up, like a manager. Their job was to orchestrate equipment, rentals, expenses, travel plans, convention center fees, and shipping. They also ended up getting a lot of free stuff too from sales and our partners, which they'd pass along to the travel team. It was all kind of a perk, to be fair, for everyone involved. But when the new director of finance started, she put in some new and strict policies. Some of their policies started with 1. Travel team is not allowed to get reimbursed without explicit approval, and nobody was approved post-event. 2. Travel team does not get a credit card of their own, or even a company card. 3. Travel team gets gift cards for a set amount, like $150, which was to be used for all expenses. Sadly, places we needed it for, like airlines, rental agencies, and hotel rooms, gas pumps, and toll booths, do not accept gift cards. Finance denied these were gift cards, and even specifically disallowed people in meetings to refer to them as such. Pre-approved credit balances, I think we had to say. But to the rest of the world, they were 100% exactly the same as gift cards with gift card restrictions. 4. No matter how early you asked for it, often finance waited until the very, very last minute, and usually after half a dozen reminders, to get anything approved, which incurred a lot of unnecessary costs like expedited shipping, same-day rental penalties, or inflated airfares. 5. If they forgot, it was your fault or your manager's fault for not reminding them enough. Okay, you reminded them 4 times to buy the team airline tickets and it wasn't done? Should have reminded them 5 times, so your fault. This was all in response to the Director of Finance's claim that it would, quote, reduce fraud, end quote, an issue that, as far as anyone could tell, had never happened. The director had this Dolores Umbridge approach that somebody, somewhere, might get away with something, and she was a patronizing git with a smug grin and this annoying head waggle when she downsplained something to you, so we'll call her Dolores. Before her, the travel team would just submit receipts and get reimbursed. Dolores put an end to that, specifically saying that the previous leader of the travel team was just going to spend all the money on steaks and wine. He, understandably, told her to go frick herself and quit the company when the dust settled. In his wake, Dolores used his free stuff from vendors as a shining example of stolen opulence and swag hoarding that she put an end to. Oh, behold the mighty on his throne of Airborne Express, stress squishies, and free Uline catalogs. That left my manager to take over his duties, and he'd never done travel team, so he wasn't really sure how it all worked and didn't push back on Dolores at first until he was forced to travel with the team. He was surprised that he didn't have an expense account or a corporate card, and when he asked for one, he got the gift card. When he tried to use it, it was rejected pretty much, everywhere that he needed it, except various restaurants. He paid for everything else on his personal American Express card, including stuff for the rest of the team, and was rejected for reimbursements because he didn't ask for it beforehand. He was on the hook for $40,000 in various things from 2-week-long trips. Of course, he complained to the top management. Dolores threatened to quit if she wasn't allowed to do her job, and the top managers never had to deal with her before and were kinda wishy-washy about being the bad guy here. Like, well, she says she lets you use gift cards, so... And when my manager said they were rejected, Dolores said he's not trying hard enough. He's afraid of confrontation. He needs to be a big boy and fight back. But in the end, the top management reimbursed him under pressure from the legal department. After that happened, Dolores settled on having certain things prepaid for, like hotel, travel, truck rentals, and shipping. But they waited so long to do them that they often tried to get hotel rooms or truck rentals the day of a popular event, sold out, or got the wrong hotel. Washington, D.C. is not the same as Washington State. Or waited so long for shipping that it cost $250 to send something overnight that would have cost $40 to send it a few weeks prior. They also didn't understand how much anything actually cost and how we saved money by doing things ourselves. And in some cases, finance did everything wrong, so the team would arrive at the right hotel and found out that finance didn't submit an authorized approval for a card for, say, like incidentals, a requirement for most hotels for trade shows. And nobody could reach them. So again, people got dinged on their personal cards. Again, Dolores said they just can't accept what the hotel desk, convention center union, or dumb minimum wage bunny at the toll booth tells them. They have to fight back. We can't spoon feed them and coddle these guys because they are too scared of conflict. Ever fight with the Jersey Turnpike toll booth collector? Yeah, neither had she. After 2 of these disasters, my manager said, just stop. Stop volunteering for these events. I will not approve time off for it. He declined being travel lead for future trips because he just couldn't afford it. This was an unpopular move at best, but he told us, just wait, let her do things her way. He was a master at malicious compliance, and with no resistance, Dolores went into 5th gear with the smug grin. Now we're going to act like a real company. That leads to the next issue. Some of these travels were in major cities like Chicago, New York City, Washington, D.C., and so on. Dolores, again, said that people were just going to these events to get the company to pay for a drinking vacation. Management was like, yeah, we wouldn't get volunteers otherwise. Well, Dolores didn't like that idea. So she decided that she would hold a staff lottery, and you could enter your name, and she'd have a drawing on who got to go to be fair to everyone. This fairness seems awfully slanted on her own staff, by the way, which we'll get to shortly. The point of these trade shows was not to take a vacation, something Dolores made absolutely sure to point out, but she didn't grasp the entire reason we went: to increase our business. It had to be IT folk for setup and sales folk for the schmoozing, but that concept never got past her ears into her cognitive understanding. Well, since those IT and tech folk who already couldn't go didn't want to pay for it, we didn't volunteer. So the travel team ended up being other company staff who had no idea how to work, act, or deal with trade shows, which was a horrific expense disaster. Imagine the administrative assistant for marketing on the 5th floor winning a ticket only to find out that she had to pay for everything. Plus, Dolores always sent one of her own to keep an eye on everyone, but none of them knew how trade shows worked either. They only knew how to kowtow to Dolores and her control issues. What's a union fee? What's corkage? No, we didn't approve some union to give us power. You plug your booth stuff into an outlet or something. They won't let you. Who's they? Well, then stop using TV screens in the booth. You don't need them. We don't sell TVs anyway. Did you know that if you have a conflict with an event center union and decline their help, they charge you anyway at the max rate? Yeah, Dolores and her team didn't know that either. And let me tell you, paying those guys a few $1,000 ahead of time is a lot cheaper than just letting them charge you fines afterwards. Oh, she tried to fight back because she was not afraid of a little conflict, but lost heavily. Ironically, despite Dolores stating otherwise at great length, the non-IT or salespeople who actually went thought it was company-paid vacation-ish, just like Dolores warned about, making it kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. The fact that they had to work was surprising at first. Then, after that got word out, nobody would enter into the lottery, so now they had no volunteers. So, Dolores assigned them to interns. Interns. I could write an entire novel from that disaster alone. Imagine sending a bunch of college kids to Vegas, telling them they had to pay for things and putting them in a job conflict situation where they were guaranteed to lose. I'm sure many laws were broken. Dolores then had to send along chaperones to manage it, who were more of their finance department flunkies, and our company ended up with massive fines for various issues, including paying bail for the interns. Because the interns got into so much trouble, Dolores started hiring room monitors for the hotels, and fully legal adults had to go to the show, work the entire day at the show on their feet, and then check back into their room. She also put 4 to 6 people to a room too, like they were a high school band or something. She even had breathalyzers brought in for it to make sure that nobody was drinking. Adults. She treated adults like this. This was brought up by my sales teams as a PR nightmare, and my boss said, just wait, okay? Let her hang herself. The first year of this, the travel team's expenses increased by over 4,000%. You heard me. 4,000%. Trips that used to cost $3,600 were now costing $144,000 or more, often because of late-minute fees and penalties. The travel team expenses went from $110,000 annual on average to over 2-point-something million. Because crap was so badly mishandled, we lost a lot of our booth slots and booth renewals, so we lost like half our trade shows and looked like idiots to our clients. But the main reason we went to those trade shows in the first place was for networking, so there was literally no reason to go anymore. This was pointed out to Dolores multiple times by the sales team, so she doubled down and canceled the travel team after just 1 year. Finally, top management got involved, who actually fought with Dolores for a year until she retired for personal reasons and to dedicate herself to her family. Then it took nearly 2 years to rebuild the travel team from scratch. People got corporate cards, travel team lead became an actual job, and when we hired one, she handled all the financial stuff for us, so it was much better, and it saved the company a ton of money in her first year. And there was much rejoicing. Update. Question says, you're really talking about some name, aren't you? The answer, there's a lot of Dolores Umbridges out there apparently. Only 3 people, former coworkers, got it right. Question was, why was she not fired when spending went from $110,000 to $2.1 million? Answer is, well, several reasons, the biggest being that she was director of finance, so I'm sure that when she gave her fiscal report, she downplayed the mistakes. We also had some really good years in the early 2000s, so if we made $2 million in profit the previous year and $3 million the next, that loss would have gone unnoticed until someone realized that we should have made $6 million instead. That's my theory, at any rate, based on the aftermath. Dolores was friends of two of the top managers and supposedly had a come-to-Jesus meeting with them about the state of our company's financial standings, so that's why they hired her in the first place. By the second year, several directors had quit, including friends of the top management who took them for drinks later and got the entire scoop. Dolores has got to go. The trade show thing was only one of the cases that she screwed things up. She also completely hosed one of our major supply chains by lowballing them, and making a few enemies that nearly destroyed the company, and gave away some of our more lucrative contracts with vendors to competitors because that broke their anti-competitive clauses. There were more issues, but that comes closer to identifying some people, which is a huge no-no here. Question is, what happened to the Christmas party? Answer: the Christmas party wasn't nearly as interesting. She just didn't have one. This was near the tail end of the whole "now we're going to run this like a real company" fiasco, but once the budget for events was $2.1 million from $110,000, the Christmas party was probably far down her list of worries. I don't even think she knew she was supposed to have one. Some people think that she was funneling that money to cover up the massive expense increase for the trade show fiascos, but I can't imagine that those budgets were from the same pool. I think around November, people started asking, don't they have a holiday party every year? But nobody knew who was doing it. Usually IT, the three people who were a huge part of it in previous years, were no longer with the company. They had quit, mostly because of Dolores. But even they didn't run it per se, they hired and catered it out at some fancy hotel locally. Our fiscal year was January to December, so December was huge for tying things up, and this was her first year running fiscal year-end stuff. She came on board late in the previous year, and so the finance would have been normally very occupied anyway. Question is, how was she let go? The answer: she just gained too many enemies in the company. It took a while, but after she had been with us for a year and a half, she accumulated too much negative drag on her inertia to get things done because there started to be a very strong passive resistance. This caused her to spiral out of control and try to start a coup which gained no traction and singled her out as being mildly unhinged, to say the least. By the time her second anniversary came and went, she started taking sabbaticals until one of them became permanent. Her assistant took over, but then was let go, and they brought in some consultant group who started a new financial team. They were the ones that suggested someone have the table team lead as an actual separate paid job. The woman who got hired and ran that was amazing. Question is it true that she tried to sell keychains and pins? Answer is, no one asked this, but a former coworker reminded me that she was appalled that we were just giving away some of our normal booth freebies like stickers and pins and shirts and keychain flashlights. She demanded we charge at least a nominal fee for them, but if I remember correctly, nobody followed that mandate. I only personally know that she sent out a memo admonishing employees that a lot of the keychains went missing and she was seeing them on people's desks. Those cost the company money, and wanted to charge employees $3 for them. But apparently, she wanted to charge people at the booth as well. This right here speaks to me as a power-hungry Karen, someone who comes into the company, wants to just run things their way, and they think, oh, we're just going to not pay attention to everybody on the ground level as to how things work and what we do and how we make our money, the whole point of going to this event, but I'm just going to try to save money, spend a lot this way, things go all out of hand, oh no, I'm costing everybody all this money, and then boom, comes back to bite her in the butt as the Karen that she is. Way to go, OP. No overtime without management approval? Great. Posted by Don't See Me. This one dates back a while to 2017, but I've been wanting to share it ever since, so apologies if it's a bit long. Background. I was in my third year of an accounting job that I absolutely hated, but I also hated the industry as a whole and was essentially using the position to bide my time as I learned a new skill to eventually jump to an entirely new career. My boss at the time, who I'll call Tia, was the shining example of this specific flavor of toxicity that I'd found sinking its teeth into most of the accounting departments that I've worked in. Imagine the power trip of middle management plus the prestige of managing multi-million-dollar transactions. She was the first accountant for the company when it started and had become the de facto choice for new highest position in the department every time the company's growth called for a departmental restructuring. The only thing I could determine was earning her these positions was her confidence and conviction in the way she determined things needed to be done, which C-Suite just ate right up, even paying for her to get whatever training or certification she needed to qualify for the new roles presented to her. In the meantime, she'd given me 3 consecutive annual reviews, scoring a solid 0% satisfaction rate each time, which was always enough to justify a 0% raise, but never enough to justify actually letting me go and putting me out of my misery. So at this point, I was fully checked out, especially after finding out that I'd become the lowest paid employee out of around 100, including interns and the front desk clerk. In the latest restructuring, Tia was not promoted to the new CFO role as the board wanted real experience, but was given a controller role while a new level of management was added between us. HR had also become its own department, no longer falling under accounting's purview. Tia didn't seem to like simultaneously becoming second in accounting's command while also losing control of HR. She convinced the company to send her to law school so she could eventually transition into some kind of Frankenstein-esque accounting and legal and HR position that would oversee essentially everything the company did outside of actual production. This required her to leave the office around 2 to 3 p.m. every afternoon to attend classes, making her unreachable until the evenings. The new management position that opened between us saw 3 to 4 employees join and leave for greener pastures over the course of a year and a half, but this story takes place while I was under the only manager I actually liked, who I'll call Kevin. I could see him doing what he could to advocate for me while still being forced by Tia to treat me the way she had previously treated me, and I could tell it made him feel awkward handing these decisions down my way. I respected his attempts to work with us, and he actually helped us create a functional and efficient department for a few glorious but short-lived months. Story. Suddenly, a bill was passed in the US stating that salaried employees making less than $40,000 a year would be eligible for overtime pay, taking effect later in the year. After 3 years of no raises, I was sitting at around $37,500 a year, making me eligible for the eventual overtime. Working in accounting, it's pretty much expected that you'll be working 50 to 60 hours a week, especially when closing out the monthly and quarterly and annual financials. However, after being shafted for so long and still being stuck with crap work that had little effect on the actual financials, I was actively giving them as close to 40 hours a week as possible, only staying behind if we'd gotten an important request towards the end of the day that Kevin begged me to take care of before leaving. I knew it would look a bit off if I suddenly started working a bunch of overtime after this change took place, so I planned on very slowly ramping up my hours over the preceding months to eventually take advantage of the extra pay. After 1 or 2 months, I was regularly putting in 45 to 55 hours a week, with most extra hours spent remoting into my home computer to practice programming, and looking forward to the income this new workflow would provide me. I guess they eventually caught on as Kevin pulled me into a conference room and presented me with a contract to sign stating that I wasn't to work any overtime without Tia's approval. For reasons that you'll see below, I quickly recognized this as a way to never have to work an extra hour for the rest of my tenure at the company. I signed it and immediately cut out all overtime, leaving at 4 p.m. that day as I'd work through lunch. The next day, I stopped showing up early, started taking actual lunches, and could be heard peeling out of the lot at 5:01 every day. Kevin noticed my sudden lack of hours and tried to mention the contract not being in effect until the bill kicked in. I reminded him that we had a signed contract that failed to list a start or end date, so I considered it fully in effect. I could see the "oh crap" realization hit, but he begrudgingly accepted the loss. Now, I'll mention again that he was great, and this action had obviously come from Tia, and he was now stuck dealing with the repercussions the same as I was, so he didn't really fight me too hard on it. Later that week, an important client request came in at around 4:45. He asked if I could stay behind to work on it, and I asked if he had Tia's approval. This was his second "ah crap" moment, as unfortunately, due to her classes, Tia had become unreachable between 2 and 8 p.m. every weekday for the foreseeable future, and he didn't usually know he'd need extra work from me until after 4. Everything went exactly to plan as I got to enjoy a comfortable 40-hour week, throwing the contract back at them anytime they tried to squeeze even an extra minute out of my time. Now for the real kicker. Before the new bill took effect, a judge blocked it and shut it down entirely, meaning no more overtime pay for salaried employees. A crippling loss for the workforce, but I at least still got to enjoy my new schedule. Management tried to claw back my hours, but hey, I still have a contract that says I can't. Sorry guys. I was finally pulled into Tia's office, who tried to explain the lack of necessity for the overtime approval now that the overtime bill wouldn't be coming into play. I again reminded her that we had a signed contract with no dates and no mention of this being in relation to the impending overtime law. Then came my favorite part of the conversation. She said, "So yes, this is still a valid contract, but I want to be clear that it doesn't override your original employment contract here with us." And I said, "Oh, you mean the employment contract that states 40 hours a week?" And that was that. I was eventually let go a few months later after replying, because I don't, when a CFO mentioned people saying I look like I don't care about my job, but I'd finally built up my skills enough to find a position in my new industry while still enjoying my severance, so I consider it a win. 4 years later, I'm doing work that I enjoy from home, hanging out with my dogs with a calmer mind and a fatter wallet, all while they're still stressing over someone else's money. Oh man, OP, so you not only got taken advantage of with that overtime, when it came to be with that contract, you worked it in the best of your ability, crinkling it and crackling it around to work for you, taking advantage of Tia's absence in the day and Kevin helping you out how he could, and then when it finally came back, you got out just at the right time, held to that malicious compliance of sticking to the letter, and finally, when it all came to a head, you were able to be honest and truthful and just in that, hey, this whole bill thing, it's gone now. It was big then, it's gone now. Good timing, I nailed it, and now you're working somewhere you love, and everything has come to a win for you. Way to go, OP. Enjoy the game, Karen. Posted by Furtive Fox 88. This happened around 2013 or so. I had a part-time gig as event staff for a local university. I really enjoyed it because it brought in extra cash, broke up the monotony of my full-time retail job, I could request game days off well in advance, and it was to sign up per gig, so I didn't have to work if I didn't want to. The city this university is in was not designed to handle the massive crowds that attend college football games nowadays. It's a super old city, like Victorian houses are everywhere, so traffic is a nightmare anywhere near it. Most people opt for shuttle buses or pay like $20 for game day parking at businesses and even people's driveways. But for those that have season tickets, they get special assigned parking areas on campus. On regular days, these areas are free for students and guests to use, but if you're in those areas on game day, your vehicle will be towed at your expense. So game day rolls around and I'm in charge of Lot D. Only tow trucks and anyone that has a D hanging from their rear view mirror gets in. A movable plastic barricade was the gateway. As always, traffic on campus becomes bumper to bumper as fans inch their way to their assigned lots. So slow, in fact, that I can easily help point people in the right direction if they're lost. I kept a notepad and a map with me so I could jot down left, straight, left, right for them without ever leaving my post. So everything is going smoothly. People are frazzled by the traffic, but very polite when talking to me throughout the day. I had just let in a vehicle and was moving the barricade back in place when a new, very ritzy white SUV whips in, preventing me from fully closing the entrance. I immediately noticed that their mirror sign thingy did not say D, but instead said Brad Pad. I walk to the driver's side window and see a young college-age man with an "I'm so done with this crap" look on his face. In the back middle seat was his very annoyed father, and the passenger seat was occupied by his very ticked-off looking mother. I say, "Hi, y'all folks need some help?" Dad says, "Yeah, we can park right here, right?" I say, "I'm afraid not, sir. This is for D vehicles only, and your pass says Brad Pad." Dad says, "But our pass is blue, and this lot is blue on the map." Quick note about the map: parking areas were colored to make it easier to visually separate one lot from another, as the same colors never touched. There was like 3 blues, 3 orange, 2 yellow, and so on, but they had nothing to do with the parking areas at all. So I say, "Oh, the colors don't matter, sir. The only thing that matters is the letters, and I can't let you in without a D or your vehicle will be towed." Mom says, "Then where the heck are we supposed to park?" Son says, "Mom, calm down." And I say, "That's a very good question because you're the first Brad Pad I've seen. So let's see." I begin scanning the map. Dad jumps in, "This is freaking ridiculous." Son says, "Dad, he's just trying to help us." There is nothing on the map that says Brad Pad, but the basketball stadium is named Bradford So-and-so Stadium and indeed has an assigned parking area around it. No letter, just gray parking area. So I make an educated guess that that's where they are to park. Problem is, it's on the other side of campus in the opposite direction they came from. I say, "I believe you guys are supposed to be at the basketball stadium back that way. I'm not 100% sure, but that's your best bet." The son rested his head on the steering wheel in utter exasperation as the dad said, "The basketball stadium's in gray and our pass is blue." My reply, "Sir, the colors do not matter. I have no idea why the university thought colors were a good idea, but all that matters is what your pass says, not what color it is." The mom, screaming at me, shouts, "No, our pass is blue and that means we can park anywhere that's blue, so let us in now because you are wrong." The son snaps his head up and looks at his mom. "Mom, shut the heck up." She didn't acknowledge her son's outburst and just kept staring at me with a glare that could melt porcelain. I have dealt with rude customers before, but never been yelled at like that before. I was stunned. After about 5 seconds that felt like an eternity, the words just flowed out of me. Okay, just go on in." I said this in a very "okay, but you'll be sorry" tone. Mom says, "See, that's better." Now, what I meant to do was watch where they parked so I could wave over the son and tell him to get his parents into the stadium and come back to move the SUV because none of this was his fault at all. Poor guy just wanted to enjoy a nice game of football with his loved ones. However, at that moment, people that actually belonged in Lot D started arriving in rapid succession, and I had a job to do. I also didn't see where they parked. Sure enough, about 45 minutes later, a guy in a university golf cart pulls into the lot and starts walking around cars. 30 minutes after that, 3 tow trucks come rolling in, each with different company names on them. 2 student cars were removed, as well as a new ritzy white SUV. I watched as they towed it down the street, Brad Pad sign dangling from the rearview mirror. About 30 minutes after the game started, the barricade was taken down and I was picked up by an event staff truck so we could start picking up traffic cones, so I never got to see the unfettered rage those people had to be in when the game was over. Also, the university does not keep track of what company tows what vehicle, so I'm sure that was even more fuel for the fire. After that day, I found a better job that paid more for 40 hours and paid overtime, so that was my last event staff gig. To the college guy driving that day, if you're reading this, I am very sorry your SUV was towed, but I hope that your parents paid to get it out of hock for you and learned something that day. This is great, MC, because you warned them like, "Hey, I know this does not make complete and total sense, but this is the way it is. I can't help you. I can't change it. You really shouldn't park here." You push and push and push, and it's like, all right, you know what? Have at it. And you let them park. You maliciously comply. They get towed. And it's the son that's like, "Oh, these are my parents. They must be having a bad day or something. I don't know what it is, but poor dude had nothing to do with it." And then the parents are towed off. And can you just imagine that Karen's rage? "I should have known we should have never parked here. We should have not parked in this lot. Why'd you all do it?" When she was the one pushing for it the whole time. I can just see a Karen doing that, can't you? I bet you that's what happened after this story. OP, glad you got in a different spot with your gig. Sorry you had to deal with this, but great story. Way to go, OP. Move your car. LOL, okay. Posted by OP Random Bystander. I'm the 19-year-old female daughter of my normally very nice parents. We had new neighbors move in about 2 years ago, and for the most part, we've just left them be. They're a little annoying sometimes, and there were a couple instances where we had to complain about the overwhelming noise of their weekend parties at night, but other than that, they're pretty okay neighbors. We've never had a problem with them until recently, after several strikes against my family. Strike number 1. Destructive dogs. So our neighbor's family and my family owns dogs. My dogs are very gentle and spend most of their time indoors. We live in Southern California, and when this incident happened, it was in the middle of the summer, so we let our dogs stay inside to keep cool. Their dogs are very aggressive and are raised as outside dogs. Every time I let my dogs out in the backyard for some fresh air, my neighbor's dogs will attempt to break through the wooden fence dividing our properties via digging, climbing, scratching, and so on. The digging was easy to stop. We just filled in the holes with dirt. But at some point, their dog managed to create a hole in the wall large enough for their dog to squeeze their face in, so about the size of a dinner plate. We have cameras, so we caught everything on tape. My parents are pretty understanding, so my dad went and talked to my neighbors, offering to pay half of the damage since it's our shared property line. The neighbor's wife, who we are going to call Lying Sally for this story, called my dad a liar and accused our dogs of damaging the fence, which we knew wasn't true, and my dad told her we had proof it was her dogs and demanded that my family pay for the damages. They fought over it, and nothing got solved, so eventually my dad conceded and nailed some plywood over the gaping hole. Problem solved, but this was only the first strike. Strike 2. Just why? The next incident is honestly really stupid, and I don't even know why Lying Sally bothered lying. So this incident happened about a few days after we had to call our third noise complaint on one of their parties again. Like seriously, who blast Let It Go at 10:30 p.m. at night? I wish I was making this up. My mom is getting out of her car in the driveway when Lying Sally walks right up to her and accuses her of yelling at their lawn mowing guy to not mow their lawn so loudly at 7:30 a.m. My mom was very confused. She's never talked to the guy who comes over to mow their lawn. We've never cared about any of our neighbors' businesses in general. For frick's sake, we have a neighbor across our street who revs his motorcycle at 6 a.m. and another neighbor who does construction stuff in his garage for a hobby. My family has been living here for almost 20 years. We're very chill with our neighbors' loud and noisy hobbies normally. Long story short, my mom confronted the lawnmower guy one morning and asked him if she's ever talked to him before, and he told her no. Lying Sally saw this and ran out of the house to confront my mom. She screams, "Why are you talking to him for?" And so my mom replies, "Because you're a lying witch." And so that's the gist of it. I don't know why Lying Sally even bothered lying about that. At this point, we were convinced Lying Sally was a nutcase. Strike number 3, the point where I finally stepped in. For the past month, my neighbors have stooped to a new low by hogging all of the parking space in front of our house whenever they get the opportunity. My family has 3 cars. 2 usually sit in our driveway, and the third is parked curbside in front of our house. My neighbors have 2 cars, both of which they park alongside the curb in front of both of our houses. Now, the curb that our houses share is only big enough for 2 cars. They've stopped using their driveway entirely just to park their 2 cars on the curb, which forces us to park our third car further down the street. It's not a big deal, but what they were doing was petty. So my parents became petty too. The moment they would move their cars to go to work, my parents would move our third car back into its spot on our half of the curb. This went on for almost an entire year until at some point an unspoken truce was made and they stopped their petty scheme. Things returned back to normal until I accidentally screwed it up. In my defense, I was driving home with the third car late at night. It's dark and I accidentally back up way too far and park the car smack dab in the middle of the curb. So my car is literally in the middle between our houses. I'm tired from working all day, so I don't think much of it since our neighbor still has a whole entire driveway to themselves. Trust me, their driveway is just like ours. It's made to fit 2 cars. The next morning, I wake up to the sound of my parents arguing downstairs. Turns out, our neighbors have parked one of their cars on their driveway, and the other one is parked in front of our third car on our side of the curb. This wouldn't be a problem if half of the hood of their car wasn't sticking out into our driveway. The problem with this is that if we tried to back out the car, the one closest to their car, in our driveway, we might hit their car, and I'm pretty sure that was the purpose. I was done with their games. So I marched over next door and rang their doorbell. The husband, we'll call him Pig for this story, opens the door and he's recording me as if I'm going to attack him, which is ridiculous. I'm 5'2" and he's close to like 6 feet tall. If anything, I should be the scared one. The conversation goes like this. I say, hey, is it okay if you can move your car? And he says, no, the police told me I can park anywhere I want because it's a public road, and they even told me I could record you. I don't even care about you recording me. I just need you to move your car. You have an entire driveway to yourself. It's just common courtesy not to block your neighbor's car into their driveway. You guys can still get out. It's not that bad. Yeah, but we just don't want to hit your car by accident when we're backing out. Is that a threat? No. I'm just saying that we don't want to pay for the damage of your car because you didn't want to move it, and I can't guarantee that we won't hit it. It's pretty dang close. I don't care. I shouldn't have to move my car. You move your car. I realized that I wasn't going to get anywhere, so I let him slam the door in my face and I walked away. I went back inside my house and got on my laptop to make sure that, yes, it is indeed illegal to park in front of someone's driveway, even partially. So my neighbor does have to move by law. However, I wanted to be a petty witch, so I moved my car. I grabbed my car keys and carefully backed up the car, again, the one closest to his poorly parked car, so that the back half is inches away from the front of Pig's car. So my car is now blocking Pig's car from pulling out into the street and leaving. My car is also blocking the sidewalk, which I know is illegal, but I already had this planned out. Basically, I caged in his car and held it hostage for a couple of days. Here's the setup shown in the diagram. Either Pig or Lying Sally would have to come and apologize to make me move the car, which I knew was very unlikely, or part number 4, victory. Sure enough, as I predicted, Pig called the cops a few days later and reported my butt. His face was so smug as the officer told me that I can't legally box in someone's car like that and block the sidewalk with my vehicle. I told the officer that I understood and that I'll move my car. But I immediately pointed out that it's illegal to partially block the entrance point to someone's driveway as well, and that Pig's car is crossing that line by over 2 feet. The smile on Pig's face vanishes, and his face turns red, while the officer tells him that he's going to have to move his car as well. So I back up my car and I'm grinning like a cat who's caught his prey, while Pig has to move his car into his driveway. I also made sure to move our third car back into its rightful spot as well. We filed a restraining order against Lying Sally and won in court. So this story is actually continued in petty revenge for a nice conclusion. I'm a 20-year-old female who lives in a suburban neighborhood with my family. A few years ago, we had new neighbors move in next door. At first they seemed okay, but then they turned out to be complete party animals. I'm talking partying 3 times a week, blasting loud music till 2 a.m. Over the past year and a half, we've had multiple confrontations with our neighbors over, petty stuff. In fact, I made a post about one of those petty confrontations with our neighbors on Malicious Compliance. Here's the link if you want some backstory, but it's not necessary. That's what I just read there. I'm shocked it blew up as much as it did, and honestly, I almost forgot about the post entirely until a few weeks ago. Here's the story. Our neighbors were having another one of their super crazy pool parties, and it was driving everyone in the neighborhood crazy. The police, they couldn't do much because we would make a noise complaint, the police would show up and then give them a warning. Things would get quiet for maybe about 30 minutes, but then the partying would start again. Over time, some neighbors began to give up and eventually some even moved away. This was especially upsetting for my mom when one of her friends, who lived on the other side of our neighbor, moved away due to our horrible neighbor. My mom had finally had enough. Once the party finally seemed to wind down at around midnight and the guests started leaving, my mom marched straight up to the female owner of the house, Lying Sally, because she's, well, a pathological liar, and warned her that we will start calling the cops on them more often if they don't stop. Of course, Lying Sally and her party guests laugh and start taunting my mom, which led to an ugly screaming match. Luckily, I had the common sense to record all of this, just in case. And thank God I did. At some point during the fight, Lying Sally screams at my mom, "I'm gonna freaking beat the crap out of you." One of our neighbors called the cops, which I don't blame him for doing so. I was getting worried for my mom, since Lying Sally kept threatening to freak her up. The cops came and everything got peacefully resolved. It wasn't until the next morning I reviewed the video and remembered that you can file a restraining order against somebody for threat of assault. Now, here's the thing. I knew that filing a restraining order against someone can cause that person to maybe lose their job or make it very difficult for that person to find a future job. I knew from the sticker on the back of her car that she works in a daycare. If I were a nicer person, I could have let it go. Too bad I'm petty. So we filed the restraining order, took my neighbor to court, and after showing the judge the video, he was immediately on our side, especially after she had initially tried to lie and claim she never once threatened my mom. She didn't know I had video proof. The judge granted us the restraining order, and we were jumping for joy. Meanwhile, Lying Sally wouldn't stop crying and pleading with the judge to rethink his verdict. The real kicker? I made an anonymous call with a friend's phone to the daycare center where she worked and let her boss know everything. A few days later, I noticed that she'd removed the sticker on the back of her car. I'm pretty sure she was fired because she started staying at home almost 24/7. Her car almost never left the driveway. Also, the best part? The crazy loud parties finally stopped. It's been radio silent for a whole month. You can bet that during Christmas, our closest neighbors dropped off a lot of cookie tins and chocolates as thanks. Whoa, am I in the right sub here? This is nuclear here. It starts off as like, okay, fine, we're going to do a car battle, right? And then it's like, oh, okay, you're going to threaten my own mom with very dangerous threats? All right, so we'll do a recording. Oh, a restraining order. That's pretty bad. Oh, no, whoa. You're calling her job a job that she can lose due to the restraining order? Oh, you did that? And boom. This went from just please move your car to I filed a restraining order and cost you your job, Karen. That's borderline nuclear malicious compliance. What do you think? I think it's pretty nasty and very well done. Way to go, OP. I have to say that one. Wow. Check out my next malicious compliance compilation to continue your listening session by clicking here on your screen. Thank you so much for checking this one out, and see you in the next one.